Alright, in this video I'm going to be showing you how to finish the top half of a pot. I find oftentimes people can raise a cylinder pretty well after centering it and opening it. Sometimes they can make the bottom rounder, but really the finished quality of a pot often ends up being at the neck of the pot. So in this video I'm just going to show you just really quickly a few ideas or directions you could go in decoration. A lot of it's going to be how to use a metal rib. I think the flexible metal rib is my favorite tool. What I'm doing here is I'm using the side of the rib, pressing it in to the outside, making what I call like a recurve kind of rib. You can see I'm tightening up the outside with the little corner of the rib there, and I'm setting the rim off of the bottom, making it a little bit wider. Those dividing lines just give your pot a little bit of interest. They're interesting when the glaze runs over those lines. You can see that where I had one recurve, I kind of divided it in half using a little smaller part of my rib, and I'm making two recurves. And you could do that same texture all the way down the pot and see if you like it. After you make all those recurves, you could alter things. But here I'm just working on the inside of the rim, maybe trying to make it have kind of a triangular shape. Maybe it kind of is a reflection of what's happening on the outside. And that could be a rim. That's just a little different than a straight cylinder. It makes it more interesting. From there, I'm just going to take this and kind of clean it up, erase that with my metal rib. I wouldn't try restarting a lot on the same pot. It's very difficult to make a variety of rims on one pot. I'm just doing it for demonstration. So here, I'm kind of doing the opposite of a recurve. I'm making like little bubbles. So you can see I made a bubble. I pushed out with my finger against a curved rib, making sure I have a nice clean starting and stopping point. Putting a little recurve on the top. So here you can see that I kind of made a round exterior curve and then an interior curve. And what I'm doing is I'm just trying to manipulate the top half of my pot with my metal rib and my fingers on the inside. So you'll see that my right hand has the metal rib, my left hand has the inside of the pot. I'm using that little corner where the rib goes from straight to round. And I'm using that to kind of divide sections. You can see I'm making these little tiny lines, and it gives me little divisions where I have these little kind of points that I'm putting on the top and bottom of that little round piece there. It's almost kind of like framing that little piece. Obviously, you can see I'm just manipulating the rim, trying to find something that I find interesting. In and out, in and out. Making the top round, making the top straight, making the top recurve, pushing it out. This is just kind of experimenting with different kinds of rims. It's a lot at once. What I want you to really do is, once you're comfortable throwing cylinders, throw a cylinder and really just try to experiment with making unique shapes. Something that's more of a sculptural shape. Here I'm just using what I have of a fingernail, and I'm pushing out, making lines. Instead of using my rib, I'm just using my hands. And you can make little dividing lines and kind of segment your pot into pieces. Another benefit of doing this kind of thing where you segment it is it gives you glazing ideas. Where you make all those lines, it's easy to glaze to that line or glaze below that line. So I'm just going to reset this cylinder by cutting the top half off, and I'm going to make it into kind of a bottle shape. Instead of working with a tall top, I'm just going to kind of collar this in really quick and make a really small bottle, so I can show you other ways to kind of alter the top of a pot or to work on decoration, but maybe not on like a generic open cylinder. Any of these things could also be done on the rims of bowls and the rims of plates. I'm just choosing to do a cylinder, which is a very basic shape, and then here what will be a little bottle. Just to give you some examples of how throwing a cylinder is really just the beginning. It's the blank that everything comes from. So here's me just using my metal rib again. I'm really comfortable with this tool. You can see that I used that little corner where it's round and flat to make a nice dividing line. Using that recurve again. And this is just to make like a little vase form, the simple recurve. A very simple pot that would be functional. You can see I'm kind of getting rid of the harshness of that line. Here I'm doing another type of collaring where I'm squeezing the clay in. It's a lot easier on small pots. Just bringing the top of my pot in, collaring it in. I'm raising it after I color it to make sure that I have enough clay to make a nice neck. A little uneven, just cutting off another ring. Alright. So as you can see, I've got this little tiny necked bottle now. If you want to understand coloring, you'll have to watch that video separately. I've done a lot of different techniques here of coloring. You can see that as I push this rim out, my index finger of my left hand is also pushing down on the rim to thicken it, so the rim itself has kind of a recurve there, or a little thickness to it. I used the underside of my fingernail to make a nice straight edge on my rim. Now I'm using the rib's little point again to make what I call like a little collar on my neck. So it's kind of like I think of like a turtleneck. It's got like an extra little collar there, and I'm making a second one, and then there's a third one, and it looks like I can get a fourth one in there. This is just changing the shape by lifting up with my inside finger against that corner of the rib. And now my vase, that was a really simple kind of bottle, has now turned into something that has a bunch of little ridges on it. The glaze could fall off of those. I could glaze that middle section a different color than the bottom. I used my fingernail here just to divide my pot now into some more sections, which is kind of like imitation bubbles that I'm making. You can see that that really smooth pot, just by pushing my finger in very gently, now has a lot of different changes in it. It doesn't mean that I like this pot, but this is a way that when you're first learning to kind of experiment with form and to experiment with shaping. If you always throw really smooth, clean shapes, you're limiting yourself by restricting your toolbox. You've got to be comfortable using all your fingers in any way that you can. Pushing in, pushing out, using the metal rib, using a wooden rib, and just not being kind of stuck in a rut. This is a way that sometimes I break a rut of mine just by trying new shapes. The last thing I'm going to do here is what's called a hollow rim. I have a very thin rim now, and I'm just kind of laying it down. I could leave it like that, where it's floating like a flying saucer, or you can see I'm very gently pushing on that edge. And now I've made the rim hollow, which kind of gives it like a very nice, thick, rounded rim. Sometimes it's nice to balance a kind of fat, squatty pot with a nice, squatty rim. I'm going to cut it in half so you can see that that rim is hollow too, and just get a sense that, you know, it's just a simple little vase. You can kind of see there a little bit that there's a hole in the rim. You don't have to worry about popping an air bubble